Come and shoot the breeze with myself and guests as we deep dive into some topics that may just pin your eyelids right back. So, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all our viewers, and welcome to another recording of or chat with In Shoot the Breeze with myself, Mandy Horton, and today's guest is Erica Johnson. So, welcome, Erica.
Thank you very much.
And Erica is in the early childhood industry, and we're just going to chat about some of the themes that are showing up there, and yeah, just chat.
Have a yarn. Just
Oh
have a
my
yarn.
goodness, because there's so much sort of showing up in different ways throughout the world at the moment, as we
Yeah,
know, so many things are changing and so much is sort of needing to be released and let go of, eh?
yeah, absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
we are sort of going to cover too some of the what we call these autistic children and some of the stuff going on around them and your theories and
Yeah.
uh, things around that. So tell
Yeah.
us a little bit about you, maybe Erica, and your work in that industry.
Yeah. No, so my name is Erica. I have been in early childhood since I left high school. So too many years now that I want to digress. But I have got coming on probably a good solid 18 years worth of industry experience.
Mm,
Um, I have worked in a couple of different centres in a couple of different settings and in different communities. So I've experienced across the board, and I'm very fortunate in the position that I am at the moment that I am able to talk to many centre managers throughout the country. So a lot of my
right.
conversations aren't just singular to Whangarei or to Northland. They are throughout the whole of New Zealand. So I'm very fortunate in that position that I get to experience that. Um, the last probably we'll say 4 years, but particularly in the last two, definitely, we've seen a huge shift with the behaviours and the goings on with children as they
Yeah.
come through. Um, whether a lot of that can be behaviour, a lot of that can be, as you said, they do sit slightly on the ASD spectrum.
Yeah.
But again, I'm not a trained psychologist by any means. I'm not an educational psychologist. I'm merely I say merely just an early childhood teacher, but I am an early childhood teacher who sees different behaviours in people and different behaviours in children, and I can draw parallels to where they may sit. Um,
Yeah.
and one thing we are taught is we all sit on the ASD spectrum. That's why it's called a spectrum. But it's just at which end.
Yeah.
I think my biggest worry at the moment is what happens to the children when they leave us, and that's like a protective thing from me. What happens when they leave us and they go into mainstream schooling where they don't have the same ratios and they don't have the same support?
Yes.
So that's a big thing for us at the moment to have to let go.
Yeah. And so you sort of, because from what I understand is you are monitoring obviously because you're
Yeah,
working with them and
yeah,
they've got
yeah,
they are in your care.
yeah.
And then you write up a report, is that correct? And then that report gets sort of
So
forwarded
how it
onto
works?
the
Yeah,
school.
yeah.
Yeah.
How it works at the moment is that if we have a child who we deem needs some extra support, we have to write up a report or a what we call an initial contact with the Ministry of Education. They then put them into the system, and then they determine how bad they think they are, or how much support they think they need. And unfortunately, as it stands, only
Yeah.
the top 2% of children get the support they require.
Wow.
Mm. So only
2%.
the top 2% will have a teacher aide allocated to them. The maximum number of hours any child at the moment under the Ministry of Education is 9 hours. So you jump around for joy when you get your 9 hours.
Yeah.
And I will preface this by saying it is not a single person in the Ministry of Education's fault. They are all beautiful, beautiful people, and they
Yeah.
are all fighting for the same cause as well. But there is something systematically wrong that we haven't, as a sector, as an education sector, haven't been able to keep up with the changing dynamics of children. And I think that's where the biggest correlation isn't lying. So the children are changing so rapidly, but the systems aren't changing as rapidly, and I don't know whether they ever will, but they're not even vaguely keeping up in speed with what's happening in the community or with the children. Yeah.
And so when when you say that these children are changing rapidly, I mean, I could surmise on what that might mean, but can you describe something there, or
there's a few different things. There's definitely we have what we've seen an increase in is ASD traits, definitely.
Yeah.
And I have my own theories, as I've spoken to you about this previously, Mandy. I have my own theories in that, and I have no historical grounding of my theory. So I just preface this by saying, but if you look back into like the 50s and the 60s and stuff, where children who would have displayed ASD, who would have been nonverbal, who would have been quirky, who all of those things that have happened, they would have been institutionalized.
Yeah.
And that's not right. I don't believe in institutionalizing people at all, and these children should not be institutionalized at all.
Yes.
But that's what happened. That's what happened 60 years ago. And then they were started to be abolished, and by the 80s, even 90s, there were still some institutions around. They are now gone, which is great. That's how it should be.
Yes.
But those people who wouldn't have necessarily had the opportunity to have children themselves are now having children themselves. And I think that is why this is just, as I say, my very rough collection. And I wonder whether that is why we are seeing more come through, because these people are allowed to experience having children themselves, and which is great. Like, absolutely. Yeah. But the support that we need to wrap around that is missing, I think. And I think that's only a small portion of why we are seeing a change in things, but it is definitely, I think, a potential reason, as a possibility as to why. Yeah.
And do you think, like, do you see them? It's horrible sort of labeling, but we're talking autism.
Labeling's awful as well, because as I say, we all sit on a spectrum.
We do.
But
are you seeing it sort of, or them? So even saying getting worse sounds terrible, but do you know what I mean? Do you see them?
I don't know whether getting worse is. I know what you're trying to say. Absolutely, I don't know whether they're getting worse. I don't think that. I think there's just more realized. So I think that is part of the issue. I think that there are more children who do fall further into the spectrum than they have before. And one fact I shared with you is, in my first, I'm going to say 12 years of teaching, I never referred a single child for any sort of behavioural issues. I referred one in those 12 years for a speech language support. And the last year, I think I have referred 13 or 14 children.
Wow.
Yeah. And a little bit of that is my own thing, because I know how far behind the Ministry of Education is and things like that. So I'd rather jump on it a lot sooner than leave it 6 months and then be like, oh gosh, we're 6 months down the road and it's another 6 months till they even look at this child. And the Ministry of Education actually in the last probably 6 months have altered how they are doing things, which is fantastic. So all the children are kind of met pretty quickly, and then they kind of go from there. So that has been a help. But just the sheer number that we are having to refer through, I think on the other side of it, screens have a lot to answer for, massively. Parenting style has changed hugely. And I'm not saying, and it's changed for the better or for the worse, whoever, that's someone else's interpretation, but it has changed. And I think children are allowed, I think parenting screens and just genetics are probably play the biggest role in how children are coming through these days. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And, there was a lot of talk around the autism coming through from the vaccinations, and the heavy
yeah,
metals in them and
yeah,
that sort of thing. And I can see and understand that when I've looked into that sort of information, I can understand how that is. And if we look at, the talk and the proof around chemtrailing and the chemicals we're getting, showered on us every day, every week, every
yeah.
whatever, all of those things can add up to something, and I get that. And it's like creating more issues around things for many people, not just young children on the spectrum.
Mm,
It's I think affecting a lot of people. But I also feel that there's um like in the earlier years there wouldn't have been the medication, eh? And now there's sort of like more of the medication coming through too. Do you see, like, do you have a lot of these children that are in your care? Like, are they taking regular medication? Do you
no,
know?
not
Or
really, to be honest. No.
no?
So we in our care at the moment, we vary. The most we'll have is children coming through with antibiotics, and that's, to be honest, far and few between.
Right. Yeah.
Um, they yeah. So no, we don't have a lot of children who are set medication at all.
No. Okay.
I think the other most common one is an aspirin inhaler, and again, we've been taking an aspirin inhaler for a very
Yeah.
long time. So
Yeah.
I think to draw parallels in that that respect from where I look at things, I don't see it being a contributing factor. But
No.
I'm not a medical researcher, so I can't say yes or no on that
Yeah. I get it.
confidently.
I
Yeah,
think it's a mix of all sorts though too, and like you
yeah,
say, genetics.
yeah.
So what sort of help do they get, Erica? Like, how do you bridge it? Like, what do you do in
So
bridging that?
we function under the Ministry of Education ratios, obviously, and they are 1 to 10 for over twos and 1 to 5 for under twos. They're not great compared to some of the other, like I think in Australia it's 1 to 3 for under twos, and it's 1 to 6 for 2-year-olds, and then it's 1 to 8 for over twos. Over three, sorry. That's just a rough guess off the top of my head.
Yeah.
Um, so in comparison to some other countries, they're not fantastic, but we still very much care for these children like they are the greatest gift in the world, because you don't get into early childhood if you don't believe that. You
Yeah.
really don't. It is a job that you either love or you hate.
Yeah.
I'm a big staunch on that, and you can't do a job you don't like. You just
No.
can't, particularly with the amount of stresses we can have in a day. So it is a job that you do for love. And yes, some days you just want to walk away and be like, what the heck just happened? But other days you're like, okay, that's why I do my job.
Yeah. I'm sure it's challenging for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah, but it's just the changing world. I feel like children are exposed to a lot more than what they potentially previously have been, because
Yeah.
some of the conversations you have are quite adult now, and it's quite interesting. And it's almost a little bit of a fresh air when you get a child come through who's still quite, I mean, because I'm talking
Innocent.
about 4-year-olds at this point, but almost still quite naive, and it's
Yeah.
quite refreshing.
Yeah.
But in terms of bridging the gap, obviously we understand the children individually. That's our sole purpose. And I think the worry for us is when we're sending these children on who we've cared for, understood so individually, and they're going from a 1 to 10 ratio, and they go to school, and sure, I know the new entrance schools classes generally start out quite small, but by the
Yeah.
end of the year, they could be up to 28. And
Right.
that's one teacher and the teacher aide for 28 children. Um,
Yeah.
and I know for a fact, like some of the children we send on, they are one-on-one at times. And so,
Mhm.
we're in an environment where we've got teams around us, and one can step aside for that hour or two that child requires one-on-one. But that doesn't happen in primary school. And it
No.
can't really happen in primary school because they're not equipped for it. So it's not anything that they've done. It's just we're not equipping the world for these children, which is where I think we need to change things. Yeah.
Yes, I
Yeah.
do too. I
Yeah.
I agree with that. And it's not that the school education can't do that. I think.
No,
I
it's not
mean,
education can't do that. I think though that then becomes a monetary thing, which everything will stem on. Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
everything stems on funding.
yeah,
And considering there's so much research out there about how the first 1,000 days are the most fundamental in a child's life. Early childhood education really does actually matter in terms of whether it's home or in a centre or in a home base. It doesn't really matter where it is, but the early childhood education does really count.
yeah, it does.
Being able to have self-help skills. So our main focus in early childhood is not to teach to read or write. That's not our focus. Our
Yeah,
focus is to teach children how to look after themselves, how to ask for help, how to learn, because learning to learn is actually a very fundamental skill that children need to have.
yeah,
Being able to have their self-help skills, know where their belongings are, know their name. That's it. So our fundamental factors in early childhood are to set children up to succeed, to have the foundation knowledge so that when they go to school, they're not having to learn all of that and they can just sit down and learn to read and write,
right.
to
Yeah,
do the ABCs and things like that.
yeah,
That's our role in early childhood. And that's what we will continue to do.
yeah,
Every government comes at different changes and how they see that. But at the end of the day, what we do in early childhood grows the next Prime Minister, it grows the next doctor, it grows the next astronaut, or it grows the next pizza maker. Like,
yeah,
it really doesn't matter. But what we do here is what creates the country. And I know that's a big pull, but it all starts somewhere, right?
yeah,
And
for sure.
foundations are so key. So the fact that there's such limited support for a sector that has such prolonged
Yeah,
impact
yeah,
is a little bit terrifying.
yes, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
you do actually get government funding, or are you having to
Yes,
fund
that's how
yourselves?
that's how that's how it all works. So
Yeah,
um it's the same with primary schools.
yeah,
For every child that attends a centre, you can claim up to 6 hours a day of government funding if they attend that many hours.
hmm,
Um, and so that's where the 20 hours ECE free comes from. So the government funds that. That's how that works. And that is there designed to have barrier-free access for anybody to put their child from 3 to 5 into an early learning centre for up to 20 hours a week.
right,
That
yeah,
is the sole purpose of that. So yes, so there is government funding that sits behind early childhood, primary school and high school. That's how they get their funding, that's how they pay their teachers, that's how that all works. Um, what there isn't the greatest funding for is for the additional needs. So for the Ministry of Education workers. So they are few and far between because that's what they're funded to do. And then there's no extra funding for the teacher aides to come in and support the children that need the one-on-one.
okay, yeah,
The funding
yeah,
really drops down. And that's why only the top 2% get the support that they require.
right.
Yeah.
Because even now I'm seeing in the in your industry, in the preschoolers, they're actually being fed by that kindy or play centre. They're feeding them even their lunches, saying don't put any food in their bag when they come.
Yeah.
Um, and so that now is something that's a regular thing.
Yeah.
Uh,
So like the centre that I work at, we provide all meals. Like we provide it.
yeah,
And that just provides another option for parents. So parents at the moment, most of them are quite time poor, and they can sometimes have their child up in like their 1-year-old with us from 7:30 to 5 every day because they have
yeah,
no other choice. Um,
yeah,
and that's what we're here for. We're here to support that parent to be able to continue to live their life,
yeah,
and to be able to go home and pay their bills. So we try and take the stress off them as much as humanly possible. Um, there are other centres that I know of that get like things like Kids Can, so they actually are provided food from an
Yeah,
external agency to be
yeah,
able, because they're in a different community. They're in a community where their parents don't really have a whole lot extra. And if the children don't really get fed in the centre, they're probably not going to be fed for the day. That's kind of what they're the demographic that they support, and they do an incredible job
they do. They
in
do.
those communities because the behaviours that they see are probably tenfold to what I see.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Kids Can is just
Oh, it's incredible. Yeah,
amazing.
yeah,
Amazing. They supply so much, like a whole little bag, a wet bag, gumboots,
yeah,
raincoat, like all of that to all the kids that my granddaughters,
yeah,
in little kindy. It was just incredible. And I'm like, wow. So
yeah.
I've started giving
But,
donation for them,
yeah. Oh,
because
they
wow.
definitely hold a very important place. Um,
Mm,
and yeah, and I know a centre in Whangarei that is they supply the food for that centre
yeah.
just so that they can then offer the parents completely fees fees free. Gosh, that's a mouthful. Um,
Yeah.
but that's what they do. So that's how they supplement their income, I suppose, is that they do
Yeah.
things like that. Yeah, yeah.
And it's just incredible that there's these opportunities there for parents and these children, because
Yeah. But do you
what
know
the
what?
hell would happen if they weren't?
Yeah.
Like,
But do you
really?
know what the problem with that is? They have to talk to the right person to know that they're there. So
Right.
it comes back down to parent education and
So what do you mean by that? Who has to talk to the right
so
people?
kids can, for instance,
Right. Yeah.
um, they offer help in more ways than just getting children off to school. They can support like someone sponsoring for swimming lessons and all of that sort of stuff. So they've got all these other little things that go along the
Okay.
side, all these
Yeah.
other agencies that do that. But parents don't know about them.
No, I was just going to say, I don't know that. I haven't
So
looked at
there's I
studied
can't
it
remember
at
the
any way,
organisation,
but
but even like the Lottery Commission, they
yes.
even do sponsorship of like children so they can have a term of swimming lessons. So there's all of these things that are out there for people, but you have to know the right person to talk to get the information. And so
Yeah.
there's a massive breakdown in the community and then I suppose within society of actually being able to pull the right information from the right place because there's no one place to go for that sort of stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
So what would be a suggestion in respect to that? Like having it in their daily or weekly, monthly newsletters, that this is what could be
Yeah.
available
But I
to you
think that,
in some way?
I think even sometimes the schools don't know. So like it is really that I think a whole separate issue. But
Yeah.
I think that would be pulling all of the resources into one place because
Yeah,
I
that's
don't think there is like a central website or anything that you can go to unless unless you do a lot of research or unless you know someone who's been through that. And it's even like the health camp up in Manu, or it's not up in Manu at the moment, but um, I've spoken to many parents about the potentially for when their child, older
yeah.
children, about going to spend 2 weeks at the health camp, and they're like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, there's literally a, a camp that you send your child to for 2 weeks. And they look after him and they instill things in them and they do this and they do that and it gives you a break and that kind of respite and they have no idea. And I'm like, all you have to do is talk to your GP about it and they will
Yeah,
refer you.
absolutely.
And it's completely free. Um,
Yeah.
but no, like just actually no idea that isn't even a potential thing that our community offers for them. Yet it's
Wow.
15 minutes from
I actually
yeah,
worked at the Children's Health Camp in Auckland and
yeah,
Pakuranga when I was about 16. And I came from a very, very good home.
yeah,
Honestly, when I got into the health camp, I was just gobsmacked at what was going on and how these children, because they came in for 6 weeks then, it was a 6 week
yeah,
uh, stay, and we were called nurses, and we would be put onto a dormitory with
yeah,
I don't know how many children in a dorm, probably about 20, maybe 16.
yeah,
And and there were bedwetters, there were ones
Yeah,
that had nits and scabies were
yeah,
really like full on. Children that weren't getting fed well, all sorts of different things, and troubled children like the middle
yeah,
kid of a family of three, and the
yeah,
middle child's been missing out, so he's playing up and he's the bedwetter and all of that.
yeah,
So we get them into normal routine, but also bring them through the bedwetting thing. So by the time they left, they would have stopped doing that. There
yeah,
was lots that we did, and it was a beautiful thing. And I would get too attached, and I learned from very early on in my stint there, which was for about a year or more. Just don't get attached, because it was
yeah,
heartbreaking when they left, and heartbreaking for that child as well. And that's really what made me stop
yeah.
getting too
So
involved with one
attached, yeah,
child or two. But
yeah,
they were just so loving. They just wanted love. And
yeah,
not that they weren't getting that in some way at home, but they really just wanted to be held and cuddled and, just loved up.
yeah,
And yeah, you really grew an affection for them for sure over the
yeah.
6 weeks. It was difficult saying goodbye to them all. It was not the best part of the whole thing, but
No, no,
you
not
had
at all.
to. They had to get. But the one thing that I did say and queried, because I just took up a job there, and then I discovered that what was actually going on and how it all worked. And it was like, well, what do these children go home to? Do they just go home straight back into the same environment? What changes there? And apparently there were ones that were working with the family on the
Yeah,
outside of that, to help adjust. Yeah, it's big.
it is.
Like,
It's massive. And
actually,
like, I think even the funding for that obviously has changed throughout the years. Um,
yeah,
and I'm pretty sure it's a 2 week stint at the moment. Um,
yep,
but yeah, like I know friends' children that have gone through their 4 bed wedding. They were still wetting the bed at the age of 9, and the parents are just like, well, I don't know what to do anymore, and they kind of gave up. But it's like that's not fair for that child. Um,
no,
and sure enough, 2 weeks there, and they've come home and they're fine, never looked back.
yeah,
Like it is such a pillar within communities, but people don't know about it, and people
no,
don't know how to access it, or they might know it's there, but they have no idea that their child could go there. It's very
yes.
interesting the lack of, I suppose, information out there for support for people. Yeah,
Oh, that's
yeah,
interesting. It's like anybody who's watching this who would like to take that up,
yeah, yeah,
and
yeah,
actually pull that information together and put it in a as a hub somewhere for people to go and find this information,
yeah,
because it's really important.
yeah. It
And
is very,
today needed more than ever. Like
yeah,
actually, eh?
absolutely. And I think even more so now, and unfortunately for places like obviously up in Whangarei, it is harder to get the more niche support that you may need. Like I know a friend's daughter who's quite dyslexic, but she has struggled, and it's not through lack of looking, and it's not looked through, but struggled to find the support that her child needs, because
Right.
there's no one in the outreaching areas that do that sort of stuff. So I'd hate to know the further north you go or the deeper south you
Yeah.
go, um, how these children who need that extra support are actually getting them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
it's quite sad, when you look at the bigger picture of it all, because there's so many now, like we're saying, that are
yeah,
really in need of this sort of help and support. And and I've been saying for a little while now, when I grew up in a small town, but and everybody knew everybody, but
yeah,
it was big enough town that you didn't know some people, but everyone took care of everyone. Like
yeah,
everyone was watching out for everyone's children. I'd get home from doing something with my mates, and mum would have been rung somebody would
yeah,
have knocked on me as to, oh, Mandy, I saw her smoking cigarettes down at the town hall tonight, and I'd think, oh my
yeah,
God, you just
yeah. Can't get
shush.
away with anything.
No, not at all. But today, there's not that thing going
No,
on. And it's like the communities need to come back together
yeah.
again
There's
and
a
be
massive,
a
there
community.
is a massive disconnect in community. Um,
Totally.
and you can put that down to a few things. I think you could put it down to the nomadic nature that people have now. Um,
Yes, for sure.
so people don't stay in the same house for 40 years anymore.
No.
They're more happy to get up and move around, and people come in from overseas. So there's a bit more of a nomadic nature with people. Um,
Yes.
and I think, honestly, sometimes I look at it and I think people are just a little bit scared.
They
Like,
are.
if you
They
told,
actually are.
yeah,
Totally.
yeah, like, I just think about it, if you were to see a child try and run on the road or whatever, and you go to stop that child, but it's a parent who's had a bad day or potentially on a substance,
Yeah.
and they're going to turn around and rip you to shreds because their child was about to run on the road, you're not going
Yes.
to do it again,
No, you're not.
you
No.
know? And that's not a far-fetched scenario to happen.
Yeah.
So I
Totally
think
that.
there's a
I
bit of
know.
there's a bit of fear in amongst all of that,
Yeah.
um, because people are quite entitled, I
Yeah.
suppose, is a way to look at it these days.
Yeah.
Entitled in the fact that don't talk to my child, that's my child. Like
Yeah.
where, as you were saying in your scenario, no one, your parents wouldn't have cared who tried to parent you. You know,
No. No. They were
so
grateful that
so
somebody had
Bob,
informed them.
yeah, Bob from down the
Yeah.
road yelled at you for stealing fruit off someone else's fruit tree. Well, good
Yeah.
job, you deserved
Yeah.
it. you know, but
Yeah.
people don't do that anymore. My parents would have done
No.
exactly the same. You probably deserve getting yelled at by the neighbour 3 doors down. Like that's fine. Then you
Yeah.
learn
No.
your lesson.
Yeah.
But
But yeah, no, it
people,
is exactly
yeah,
that. It's getting, and I've just, talking with a family lawyer the other day. It's her thing, her business, and
yeah,
she's just done. She said, I'm done with the meth heads yelling at me and getting
yeah,
aggressive when I'm trying to help their children, and
yeah,
exactly that thing, and
yeah,
she's just burnt out. She said, I can't do it anymore. And I sort of said to her, it seems to be getting darker in there. And she said, oh, that's it exactly. Like
yeah,
it's just become so much, and it's increasing, expanding more and more in the same way that there isn't any help. It's
yeah.
like it just doesn't seem like anything's helping them.
No,
And yeah, and there's this resistance to that help as well. It's like having
yeah,
to fight them to get them help, you know?
yeah. Oh, absolutely,
Yeah, it's
absolutely.
like
And that's
crazy.
part of it. And I don't even think that matters which area in society you fall. Um,
No,
because I've had some pretty decent conversations with parents along my time,
I bet you
who
have.
are in complete denial that their child needs extra support.
Yeah,
And it's like I honestly appreciate it from their perspective. But sometimes that child going into mainstream school, they're just going to become the little fish,
yeah,
and they need that help more than the parents know or understand. But again, we have to be incredibly careful how we broach that with parents.
yeah,
Um, Even though we are trained professionals in our field, we are. I studied for 4 years. I've done this job for 18. I've pretty much been there, done that. Am not the child's parent? No, I'm not. And do I know the child best? No, I don't. But from my professional opinion, this is what I see.
yeah,
But we're just early childhood teachers, so we're regarded sometimes, not by all parents, don't get me wrong, so my parents are the
yeah,
most
yeah.
lovely people in the
That,
world.
yeah,
But we're just early childhood teachers, so we just teach ABCs. What do we know about
right.
child development?
Yeah,
Um, and so that's it. People don't want to take the advice of professionals because they know better. So that's
hmm,
where that scaredness or that entitlement comes from. Well, I know better than you, so I'm not going to listen to you. Same with your lawyer friend. Those people are yelling at her because they know better than her.
yeah,
She knows the law. you know,
yeah,
she's a trained
exactly.
professional. She studied for 5 years to do what she does. She
Yeah,
knows the law inside and out. These
mm,
guys think they know the law,
yeah,
and they just don't.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's a hard world at the moment, isn't it? In
it is.
many ways. What do you feel like in an overall? I know you've just
Yeah.
sort of probably said it all really, but in an overall way, what would be, and definitely the information hub would be a great thing.
Mm.
But how do you feel maybe, because it's not, I sort of don't feel like the issues in your sector in the sense of like, because you tend to be getting it sorted in a way? I know you have some issues going on
Yeah,
and things
yeah.
probably, but in the educational, what would you say they needed to do to accommodate this when they come into that space?
I
Employ
think,
more?
what was that, sorry?
Employ more?
Yeah, I was going to say, I think the crux of the world comes down to financial.
Yeah.
And
Yes, but
horrible as
too,
it
though,
is.
Erica, excuse me, though, but
Yeah,
when you look at what our government can do with lots of money on different things, they're not taking the most important things and putting the funding into
yeah,
those. They, sending overseas to aid other countries. I get it, beautiful thing, but actually, where did they find that money when they're saying there's no more for education or there's no more for, whatever it
yeah.
might be, the
I
health
think
sector,
I think even
like,
yeah, I think even if you looked though at what they put aside for education or what they put aside for, overseas aid or whatever it is.
yeah,
So if you look at what they put aside for education, like for instance, in the Labour government, their kind of thing that they wanted to bring out was 20 hours for 2-year-olds. So to fund them at the same rate as what they would the 3-year-olds that they fund, so there was no barrier-free access. And I
right,
appreciate that aim was to help the working parents because 2-year-old childcare is expensive. It is bloody expensive.
yeah,
That aim was to help the working parents, and I appreciate that. But I'm like, if you can put that much money that the parents aren't getting at the moment, but if you can put that money that you're willing to put into that barrier-free access for 2-year-olds, why don't you take that money and put that into children with additional needs?
mm,
So I think, and then they can just stay status quo for now until we have this issue over here sorted out, and then we can go from there. Now the national government's come in, they've taken away the 20 hours, but they're now just giving parents $75. So they've not changed the problem. They've just changed the name. They've
yeah,
just switched it.
yeah.
So I'm like, so you can give parents up to $75 a week,
It's
but
not,
you can't
yeah,
you can't
mm,
fund teacher aides for children that need it.
yeah.
Yeah.
I know, it's so like there's so many things that are wrong, eh?
Yeah, and
Like,
then but then you can look at it from the flip side and be like, well, my child's normal. My child doesn't need all the extra special stuff, because this is people's entitlement.
yeah,
Why do they get the money when I don't? Because they get a teacher aide. Why can't my kid have a teacher aide? And I
right,
think that's where the society disconnect comes into place, as people are just so out for themselves in terms of entitlement that they forget about the big picture. That child didn't ask to be born with
yeah,
additional needs, but that child needs help to support those.
yeah,
Um, and that's just the lottery draw. Unfortunately or fortunately, because some kids with additional needs are the greatest gifts to this world.
I
Honestly, they are
know,
awesome.
yeah, yeah,
Actually,
I
they all
get
are,
that.
not just some, they all
I
are. They're
know,
all like just their way of thinking and their way of doing is
yeah.
incredible. But there is no support for them. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
is there support for you guys who are helping these children? Like
Not
you must be seeing, and your stress levels have probably
mm,
gone up because you
mm,
must be seeing more hardship in the families, which
definitely.
is coming
Definitely.
through into these, I mean, obviously showing up
Yeah.
in your industry.
Yeah.
And that must be quite hard to watch and not really be able to do too much
Yeah.
about.
Yeah. I have learned through my career about what emotional pressure to take on. And at times
I'm
I can
sure.
probably come across quite heartless. And trust me, I'm the opposite to heartless.
Yeah,
But
for
the
sure. I
only
know.
way that I can cope personally with seeing some of the stuff that happens
Yeah,
is to pretend I don't care. Because if I don't care, I care more than people actually will ever know. And trust me, I do. Um,
I know that, Erica.
yeah,
Yeah.
but I can't take on everybody's emotional baggage. I just
No.
can't do it. Um, and I will help people out and help people out and help people out as much as I humanly can. Like I will often spend an hour or two with every family that needs it, but I will sit down with them. I will work out their incomes with them. I will work out whether it's best for them to financially go back to work 2 or 3 days a week with the government support that we can get from WINS, or the working for families that I can help, that we can help them apply for from IRD. I will literally sit there with them and work
Wow.
out whether it's better for them to go back to work 2 or 3 days. That's what I can do for them, because financially that could make or break someone.
Yes.
But then, for 2 days, if you actually have your child in here, that's a whole less day daycare you're having to pay, and then you'll get money from the government, so they're giving you money, and then, if your child's off sick, you're not having to pay. So, it all weighs out.
Yeah.
Some people, they don't have an option, and that $50 extra they make on the third day, they have to do it,
Yeah.
So, yeah, I have learned to have to kind of protect myself a bit emotionally. And like you said with your kids that you had for 6 weeks, I have had my kids for 5 years.
Yeah.
I started with them at 6 months old, and I see them off to school at the other end of it. And that's a very hard goodbye, because you've seen them grow.
Yeah.
Yeah,
For
yeah,
sure.
yeah,
Oh God, yeah.
yeah. So you have those kids for 5 years, and you're so excited for them to go on to their next journey. You really, really
Yeah.
are, because they're so ready, and it's so awesome. But it is always really hard, particularly also saying goodbye to the parents, because you've seen them every day for the last 5 years too. Have a
Yeah.
chat, all about their life, and they know all about yours. And then they just disappear one day.
Yeah. That would be
Yeah,
difficult.
yeah,
Oh God. And I know the feeling, like I can absolutely feel that, having to protect yourself, because
yeah.
you can't get involved either too. I bet there'd be um uh the protocol. You'd have to have like you wouldn't be able to do too much around some situations that you'd like to do something around.
And even like there's a real grey area even around babysitting. Like I don't do it.
Yes.
I don't do it at all. Um, and not many of them, I don't think really any, maybe one or two, but they do it very on the down low.
Yeah.
Because if something was to happen in someone's home, not connected with work at all, but because
Yeah.
they've met that person through work, work is then implicated.
Yes, I can
And
imagine.
so there's a real grey area there about that. So that sort of thing is you just have to say no to. Like you've got to put yourself in a position where you can protect yourself.
Yeah, for sure.
And yeah, it's a journey.
I reckon, and it's such a, because it's children, eh?
Yeah,
It's,
and
it's
that's also what came to mind just before. Is like we've had many families, parents split up while we've been looking after their children.
mm,
We've done that, and we've had parents then start to fight against each other and try and stick us in the middle of it. And I get it; they're clutching at straws, like they need the support. Yeah,
yes.
yeah, and but our stance is we're here for the child. Like
Yeah.
you are 2 grown adults. I can see you're both upset, like whatever it might be, that is fine. You guys do deal with you. We will look after the child. Um,
Yeah.
and that is the most important. I've been pulled in by the courts to custody battles. But the only person I will talk to is the lawyer for child. I won't
Yeah.
talk to either of the adults, the parents or lawyers, because that
You
is not my
couldn't,
place.
no, you
No,
wouldn't be able to, because
no,
it's almost like picking side, and you wouldn't
and I'm
want to
not
pick a
picking
side.
sides. You guys are
No.
both adults. You guys can both do it. Um,
Yeah.
and, I am here strictly for the benefit of the child.
Yeah.
And so you also have to draw that line. You also have to
Yeah.
draw that line. And then you see other things like parents driving off without kids in car seats. Um, and
Yes.
there's actually very little you can do about that apart from call the cops. But
Yeah.
by the time you call the cops, they're always probably home and it doesn't even matter. So
Yeah.
there's all those other things that unfortunately sometimes you have to learn to turn a blind eye to, because
Yeah.
it will start
Too
to eat you up
much.
inside.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
too much, Erica. I
So,
get that. I see. Honestly, I've seen families with these kids just jumping around the back seat, no
yeah.
car seats,
The same
nothing.
as you drive down the road, you have to kind of learn to turn a blind eye to that, because it's like,
Yeah.
what what more could you do in that situation? I
Yeah.
have to call the police, and get yourself upset, you know?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I go back to, like, there weren't car seats when I was a kid.
No.
We didn't have any of that, but I'm here.
Yeah.
It's like that. But I get today's a bit more dangerous. There's far more cars on the road, all those
And
things. And they're not as strong as the old cars we grew up in.
no, and
But
they go faster, and
totally.
they're made of paper, and all of those sort of things.
Yeah.
And they
Oh,
don't. Yeah, it's just interesting.
it's so interesting, but bloody difficult. And it'd be very
Yeah.
difficult not to get
So you see,
involved. And
we sit here as adults and talk about this, right? Imagine what the kids are going through.
yes, exactly.
We have the ability to decompartmentalize it, to understand that we need to put our emotions aside,
Yeah.
to be able to sit here and talk about it and hash that out. These kids are
Yeah.
feeling all of these feelings and they have no idea what they are.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. They can pick it all. Yeah, they can pick it all up and they can feel it all, but they have no idea how to process that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think there's something in the pipeline as far as the educational system stems that might be sort of looking like it's changing things, or
There's a
even
lot
in the
more
support
noise.
stuff for you?
There's a lot more noise happening, or there was in the last government. So it's really hard when governments change.
Yeah.
And one thing anybody in education pretty much will tell you that the national government's not it. The Labor
No.
government, if you want support in education, unfortunately or fortunately, whichever way you want to politically reside,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
Labor government is it.
Yeah.
And so under the national government, it'll be an interesting journey.
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
And for some people in education, it's probably the greatest thing because they're much more business focused than what
Yes.
Labor is.
Yeah.
That's great. But for us on the floor in the thick of it, there was a lot of noise towards the end of mid last year about changing the ratios and things like that. So whether that happens or not, that in this current government will be interesting to see. Personally, I don't think it will. I would be ecstatic if it did, but I don't think it will. Just because of the business nature of their thinking. That change the government. I mean, change the ratios. You need to employ more people. Simple. But with that also comes the staffing shortage. So they're not going to then change the ratio and be like, well, now you have to have 4 extra staff, and there's not even enough staff to cover what we've got.
Yeah.
So,
and then is the staff shortage? Is that because you're not finding people that want to come into that industry, or is it
a combination of things? Historically, early childhood teachers have been horrifically underpaid.
Yeah,
horrifically underpaid for the amount of. So we've just gone into what they call extended full pay parity. So we are now at the same level as kindergarten teachers. Prior to that, I was sitting $30,000 under a kindergarten teacher.
Right.
If I did the same job that I'm doing in a primary sector, I would be paid $50,000 more than what I am being paid currently.
Wow.
So historically, early childhood has been paid absolute scraps. So why would you want to get into an industry that you're not even recognised for? Like some of my staff, like I've literally had teachers leave and go and work at the warehouse because they get more money. Like that's
outrageous, eh?
Yep, actually. And that's a qualified staff member who studied for 3 years. Like that was the level at which we were being paid and being funded. That has changed in the last year. That has definitely changed. So that's fantastic. So hopefully that's a little bit more of a draw card for people, is that the financial staff is actually there to support you as you grow through your journey.
Yeah.
So money was a big one. To the paperwork has jumped up a lot, like our regulations and the need to do a lot of paperwork is very high. And 3, it's just a job that you have to love. I always come back to that. You have to love children because the other stuff that goes on, like, the regulation side and the stressfulness and the having 4 babies sitting there crying at you because they're all settling in on their first day is stuff that you have to be able to get through. And for some people, it's just too much. Yeah.
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 Do you have many men in the industry? Like in
We're getting more and more. It's really awesome. So when I first started, I didn't not a single one. But I currently have one at the centre I work at. And I know a lot of centres in Whangarei probably have at least one male working for them.
that's really good.
Yeah, it is. It's really good. A lot of them are primary trained and then they actually just stumble into early childhood.
Yeah.
And so not many of them are actually early childhood trained, but the one that I work with at the moment, he is, as a person, very shy and quite insular, but honestly, his connections with those children are just incredible. And they just love him. So having that presence around him, with him around, for those boys particularly, so important. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's so gorgeous. Because there was sort of a lot of discrimination around men, with children for a long time.
Oh, it all started with that
oh,
childcare crash. That's where it all started from, that Peter Ellis case.
yes.
And they
It's
all
sad.
disappeared.
It was
And you know
sad.
what? I totally get it. Like, I've worked with men we've probably had a male at the centre for the last, I'm going to say 10 years,
Yeah.
at least one. But the whole way through, they've not done nappies. You know, like they've had to say, I can do everything else. I'm happy to change the children on the floor in front of people, but I'm not prepared to put myself in a nappy room by myself.
Isn't that sad?
And that's so sad, because as a woman in this industry, you wouldn't even think twice.
Exactly.
The child's nappy, because that's what the child needed. But for the men, we do have to think about some parameters for safety. And it's not that we don't trust them, because I trust them wholeheartedly.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to put them in a position that it's he said, she said. Like, I'm just not going to. Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
No, you'd have to be very careful around it for sure. Which again is sad, because it could be absolutely a woman too. It wouldn't matter. You know what I mean? It could be totally.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And it's best to play in the safety of it, you know.
Yeah, it is. And so we're just very cautious around and like as they say, they're not opposed to doing the work. That's not the issue. It's just like, well, actually it's safer if someone's got eyes on you, not because we don't trust you, but because we want to protect you.
Yeah.
And
that there's a gorgeous thing in the sense of protecting them, but it must also feel a wee bit like it must feel a bit shite, really, for them to have to think that that's even happening. Like, it has to be that way.
And
Do you know
it's,
what I mean?
it's quite interesting, like historically, even in my career, I can remember an incident that happened, not at my centre, just in a centre, and a child had gone home and said one of the teachers had touched her.
Right.
The parent's immediate reaction was it this man or was it this man?
Oh, wow.
So not who was it, but was it this man or was it this man? And because there happened to be 2 males working at the centre at the time, so it couldn't have possibly been anybody else. It could only have been those 2 male teachers.
Wow.
And it turns out it was neither of them.
Yeah, I bet. I was just going to say, I bet it wasn't either of them.
You know, but the parent's immediate reaction was it this man or this man?
Yeah.
Yet there was, I think, 9 other females working at that centre.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. But the parent, that was the parent. And so that's just society thinking it couldn't possibly be anybody else but those 2 guys.
Yeah. It's sad. It is, but it is changing. And, you know, even nursing now with nurses, male nurses, it's like that was really weird for me, I have to say, when I first realized there was male nurses, and oh my gosh, he's going to give me a bed bath. It was like, oh, so it was quite different. But not a thing anymore, is it? I mean, it's
Yeah.
just so accepted, and this is that too. It'll
Yeah.
be easier for them as it gets on, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hopefully. Let's hope
Hopefully.
anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow, Erica, that's really cool. And thank you so much
That's no
uh,
worries.
for coming in and having this chat because I know we've talked about this before, and it was like that was just so interesting to me what was,
Yeah.
the way it all works and how what what the struggles are too. And I think a lot of people, like you say, don't know what's available. Even
Yeah.
hearing this chat that we're having, and that might flick somebody in and go, oh my God, now I know where I can go and
Yeah.
have a chat with somebody, so that's a really cool thing.
And I think, like, as well with that, there's a lot of church-based support out there or whatever it
Yes.
is. But for some people like myself, I'm not religious at all. Um,
No,
and I wouldn't seek out that support. So
no,
is that the stigma around it, or do we need to create something that isn't church-based, that
yeah,
thing underneath it all? Is there something out
yeah,
there that can be created that isn't affiliated with a church or a religion
yes,
in
yes.
there? And so I think that's a potential another side avenue that can happen along the way. Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful. No, that's exactly it too. I know
Mm.
it does put a lot of people off for sure.
Yeah.
It's just not
Yeah.
their thing. So
Exactly.
it's
And
all
it's just not
good.
my thing. So
No, not mine. Yeah,
I wouldn't necessarily seek that out. Like that
yeah,
would be my first port of call. And so
yeah,
I think it's potentially, is there something else that we could do that it
yeah.
would be the first port of call?
Yes, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh no, that's awesome. It's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
Very, very cool. And I'm sure as we move through these times, because, we know a lot of it is to highlight a lot of the sort of thing that's not happening
Yeah.
and bring
Absolutely.
in new ways that we can work through these issues. And
Yeah.
I'm sure, and this is a big part of why I felt the Shoot the Breeze was to talk about these types of things, because I'm sure there's a lot of people don't know what's going on,
Yeah.
that don't. And I think it's good for people to understand it a wee bit. And somebody who may be watching this is going to go, oh, I'm going to set up a hub.
Yeah. Yeah.
That would be fantastic, where people had all the information of where they could go to get some assistance
Yeah.
and funding and etc. So
Yeah.
yeah, full stuff.
Yeah.
So
Awesome.
yeah, thank you so much, and
No
you have
worries.
a wonderful day for the
Yes, you
rest of
too.
it.
Have a lovely day.
I will. I will. Much love, Erica.
Okay. Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye bye.